And we are live. Welcome to the NBA Strategy Show. It is Tuesday, November 2nd. I am Josh Engleman. I am joined by Adam Scherer, and we're actually going to talk in depth about 5 NBA games today. We probably don't have to worry about running up against the time, but we'll give it our best shot. Before we get started, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. It's going to be a good one. Coming off of a 9-gamer yesterday. I believe we have 11 tomorrow. That one's not going to be much of a treat, but we'll be in a little bit earlier to try to do that one. Either way, like, subscribe, notification bell. Adam, how are you?
I'm good. Didn't win any tournaments last night, so it feels pretty disappointing. I'd kind of forgotten what that felt like, but excited to, hopefully get back to it tonight. 5 gamers, so should be a little bit easier to talk about without running out of time.
Yeah, we should be able to give it our best shot here. Anything interesting at all for you yesterday? It was not a fun slate for me once Tobias Harris went down.
Yeah, it wasn't great for me. I mean, I played
out
100% Drummond, like 85% Korkmaz, and then I think just kind of spread stuff out elsewhere. Played a good amount of Milton, but had a lot of good teams that were just kind of ruined by like Trae Young or Julius Randle or take your pick of other guys that underperformed. Hockey went okay, but yeah, it was just kind of one of those normal days where I pretty much broke even across everything, which is a good result, but nothing exciting.
Did not expect the 53 fantasy point performance out of DeMar DeRozan yesterday. Bulls just continuing to roll 6-1 now. Franz Wagner going for 45 was also not one that I had on my list of things, but he's been great so far for Orlando. I'm anxious to see what he ends up being.
Yeah, he's been really good, and Cole Anthony is like legitimately really good.
Yeah, he 58.8 FanDuel points yesterday, 61.3, I believe, on DraftKings. Second highest score behind Paul George going nuts in the late game, which I definitely didn't need.
I had 25% of him. It just didn't really matter.
Yeah, I was very light on that late game. I was too busy playing Tyrese Maxey to no avail. So
did you?
I'm ready to go ahead. Hit me.
I think it was Haralabob tweeted about Cole Anthony that like I don't remember the exact number, but I think it's like the Magic are scoring like 0.85 points per minute without Anthony on the floor, and then with him on the floor, they're like legitimately good.
I have not seen that, but that's something we could look at if we wanted to. Yeah, he's been great. I'm really anxious to see what that Orlando team looks like when they get 5 starters back.
I don't even remember who they're missing outside of like
Fultz
being limited.
Fultz, Isaac, Michael Carter Williams is going to play for them if he's ever healthy. Who's the 4th? I type it in every day. Oh, Etuan Moore's there, but it's not him. So 3 starters, I guess.
Carter Williams ain't a starter.
Depends on the player. Sure. Well, honestly, like all of these guys are basically like the same level of talent,
except for Anthony.
They just have different ages. Well, I don't know. He's been good so far. I don't know what to make of him moving forward.
Yeah.
Let's do this. Milwaukee Bucks at Detroit. Bucks are 4. This is crazy. The Bucks are 4.5 point favorites in Detroit. And people think like, oh yeah, well, Milwaukee should be favored in Detroit. Milwaukee will be without Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, Brook Lopez, and Dante DiVincenzo. 4 of their 5 starters not going to be playing today in this one. Giannis, the only leftover. And because Giannis is that good, he's still a 4-point favorite in Detroit with whoever else wants to show up with him. Let's start on this Milwaukee side. Giannis is 11,300 on FanDuel, 11,600 on DraftKings. And I don't want to say that I think that he looks great, but I don't see a single thing that makes me want to not play him today.
Right. He's priced up. He's at 11.6. That's obviously pretty expensive, but I don't really see anything wrong with that either. It's not a bad matchup against Detroit. And then there's just none of the other main offensive pieces for Milwaukee. Giannis is one of the best per minute fantasy producers, regardless of who he's playing with. Now you're taking Drew Holiday away. You're taking Chris Middleton away. It's just going to be Giannis doing even more than he normally does. Yeah, it makes the team a little bit more one-dimensional and in theory easier to defend, but I don't really know what the Pistons are going to do about it anyway. So still really love Giannis. There's always the question, especially on a 5-game slate of, does enough value open up to get to him? But there's plenty of value from this team because outside of Giannis on DraftKings, the next most expensive player is Grayson Allen at 4,800. So you're going to get a team full of Milwaukee guys that, yeah, most of them aren't that good, especially from a fantasy standpoint, but they're cheap and they're going to have to play minutes. So I don't think, even with it being a 5-game slate, that it's going to be difficult to find the value to get Giannis into lineups.
Yeah, the ownership on everybody else is where it starts to get kind of crazy. We've got Pat Connaughton in the 30s on FanDuel and DraftKings. I don't agree with that. Connaughton is 5K on FanDuel. I just think that that's going to be too much ownership. We've got George Hill pulling a bunch on DraftKings. I think that's well warranted at 3,800. Thanasis is 15% owned at 3,100. Grayson Allen's getting owned. Jordan Nwora is getting owned. One guy that isn't getting any ownership, 4,700 on FanDuel, 4,400 on DraftKings, Bobby Portis. Don't know how many minutes he's going to play. I gave him 22. I like him in that scenario, but who the hell knows right now? Either way, how do you want to break down this entire Milwaukee rotation in terms of guys you're trying to get to?
So we at least have a blueprint for it from the last game against Utah. You had George Hill play 30.5 minutes. I think he's typically playing 30 to 32 here. He looks like a good value at 3,800. Not the best per minute producer, but he's really cheap, and the minutes sort of have to be there for him. Bobby Portis played about 18 minutes off the bench. 19 minutes off the bench. I'm assuming you get another, 20 or so from him. It makes him viable in tournaments at 4,400. It's a situation where if he plays like 4 minutes more than we're expecting, he becomes really, really good. In 20 minutes, he's good, but it's about, where he should be priced. So there is some volatility there, just depending on, how restricted he is in this game. Connaughton probably playing around 30, Allen playing around 30. Thanasis played 32 in his start against Utah. Don't know if he starts here and if he plays that many minutes here, but if he does at 3,100, he's going to look really good. Even if he plays like 22, 23, he's going to look reasonable. You do have Rodney Hood probable and Semi Ojeleye not on the injury report. So their rotation can be a little bit deeper than it was in their last game because both of those guys were out. That makes me think you're more likely to get, the low 20s from Thanasis than the 32, and that you're not likely to get or Hood played last game. Sorry. It was Semi that was out. Maybe you get a couple minutes shaved off of like Justin Robinson, but overall it's a pretty straightforward rotation. I think you can count on Hill, Allen, and Connaughton playing around 30 to 32 minutes. Portis plays around 20. You probably get 22 to 24 from Justin Robinson and Jordan Nwora. And then the rest is just kind of filled in by Hood and Semi and Thanasis.
I'm really the piece that I want to pay closest attention to is Pat Connaughton on FanDuel, because I think 34% of him at 5K is crazy.
That seems pretty aggressive. It's not like he's a great fantasy producer. He's not bad, and he has games that can come through. Like he rebounds well, and occasionally can get hot, but it's not like he's a great per minute producer, regardless of who he's playing with.
0.72 in my model, 0.71 for the season. I've got him at 0.76 for this game. I'd have to go significantly higher for 34% to be like an interesting spot.
525 minutes since the start of last year without Middleton or Holiday on the floor. 0.83 FanDuel points per minute for Connaughton.
Okay.
But even then, it's a 13.8% usage rate, 9.8% rebounding percentage, 8.3% assist percentage. He's gotten a lot of blocks and steals.
Yeah.
It's just he's okay. He's not someone that I am particularly concerned is going to put up a huge score that buries me.
Right. Like, I mean, just the way that we have it right now, Pat Connaughton is 5K projected for 34% ownership on FanDuel. And this honestly works for DraftKings. Jordan Nwora is at 4,500 across both sites. He's at half the ownership or a third of the ownership on DraftKings. Not that I like Pat Connaughton clearly has the bigger minutes ceiling between those two, but if we're just talking about on a 5-game slate, like just flip-flopping some of these random Milwaukee guys is probably going to pay you off better in the long run, because I don't think that any of them just immediately stand out. Like, yeah, George Hill's price on DraftKings is great at 3,800 or Thanasis at 3,100, but their actual performance, who the hell knows? I mean, George Hill's bad DFS-wise. Grayson Allen's bad DFS-wise. Pat Connaughton is bad. Like, all these guys are bad per minute guys. Thanasis is better. He's like a 0.8 and change guy, but Milwaukee's tricky tonight.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, if you put Giannis on the floor, same, like 0.85 fantasy points per minute for Connaughton. Without Middleton and Holiday, Giannis 1.8 DraftKings points per minute.
Don't forget Lopez.
What did you say?
Don't forget Lopez.
Well, yeah, you just start getting a really small sample if you do that. Like
for Milwaukee, it's not really as bad as it seems.
That's true.
They are pretty much the exact same team for most of these guys. So
yeah, I just don't really know what impact. Like Lopez doesn't matter.
Well, to me, it matters because it moves Giannis from the 4 to the 5 and changes their entire spacing.
He's 1.76 if you take Lopez off.
Okay.
He was 1.8 if you just don't account for Lopez.
Oh, I meant it more for Connaughton just to see if there was any change. For Giannis, who gives a shit? He's going to be 1.7 something, and we're just going to play him a lot.
Yeah, that's why I was confused. I was just like, I don't think Brook Lopez is messing with Giannis too much.
No. For the trickle down for everybody else, because it really does change the spacing of the team.
Right. So if you just take Middleton, Holiday, and Lopez off, and you don't worry about who is on, Connaughton's at 0.79 DraftKings, 0.82 FanDuel, over 383 minutes. If you put Giannis on, it drops to 215 minutes, 0.83 DraftKings, 0.87 FanDuel.
Okay. Good to know.
But that's not like, it's not a situation where I'm looking at it and saying, oh, the rates go up, because he also ends up with 2.6 steals per 100 possessions and 1.5 blocks. So it's just a small sample size thing why it's going up. My bigger takeaway is that the rates are pretty much constant across the board.
Before we touch on Detroit, I got to hit on this gigantic super chat, 200 bills, Adam, from James Hood. Thank you guys for the content. I've been watching Josh's content since before the Awesemo days. You two are the best in the biz. Took down the big FanDuel contest thanks to you guys, which I did see this morning. So, James, congratulations for that. Had Tyus Jones and George Niang, I believe, but Tyus Jones for sure. He mentioned it in the tweet. So congratulations to you for having Ja Morant be questionable yesterday, because I don't get the sense that you would have had Tyus Jones otherwise.
No, that's awesome, though. Nice one. And that's the one that has like a ton of entries, right, that you always complain about.
Yeah. Yesterday was 555, I believe, to get in 80-something thousand entries.
Yeah, that's a lot. So nice job.
Look, $100,000. That's so awesome to see. It's probably the most difficult NBA contest to win every day, right? Maybe like the quarter or something.
In terms of being unlikely to win, it's got to be up there.
Well, combination of it's slightly sharper than like a 150 max at the mini max level, but it's probably the biggest entrant contest that exists or something in that neighborhood. So yeah, that's the toughest thing to do is to win that tournament, and you did it, and you're now 100K richer. So congratulations, man. Buy something fun. Buy a Tyus Jones jersey or something.
And you did it with George that you meant to play, which I'm sure feels good.
Yeah. I believe it was 1% Tyus Jones, 1% George Niang. They were like somewhere in that neighborhood yesterday. Niang was just going off, which I was not excited about as a large shareholder of Tyrese Maxey. On to the Pistons. Finally get to take my first look at Cade Cunningham. And I think people are going to be taking some interesting looks at him on DraftKings, although the ownership doesn't say so. Right now, we've got most of the ownership for Detroit coming into Jeremy Grant and Sadiq Bey. They're in like the 15 to 25% range, depending on which site. Everybody else is in single digits. I have a lot more interest in the Pistons, even though their rotations have become a little bit flatter as of late. But I'm open to getting to more Detroit because, one, this game should just be a little bit closer. A 4.5 point line means that it's not 11 like it normally would have been if they were playing. I just see like some decent price tags here, but I want to start with Cade Cunningham, 3,600 on DraftKings today. Do you have any interest? Do we know how much he's going to play?
Yeah. So for one, there's no chance in hell he's 5% owned. He played 18.9 minutes in his first game. They had said he'd be limited. Then he sat on the second half of the back-to-back. My assumption is he's going to play, a handful of minutes more, probably, just kind of getting ramped up. But at 3,600, and the reason I say he's not going to be 5% owned, he was, I don't know, 50. He was like 29% owned or something last slate, same price tag on a minutes restriction where he's going to play even less minutes.
Okay.
And if I remember correctly, it was a bigger slate. So, yeah, I mean, he's not going to be 5% owned, but either way, he's going to look like a good option here. Whenever you have somebody that is on a minutes restriction, it obviously cuts off the top end of their range of outcomes a bit, and it makes it a little bit less likely that they absolutely bury you if you don't have them at high ownership. But when you're talking about somebody as cheap as Cunningham, it really just becomes more about what else you're getting into your lineup. And so I'm typically still going to be willing to play a lot of him just because it's going to open the door for me to get Giannis plus other good pieces, as opposed to not doing that. So I think Cunningham's going to look really good. I'm assuming he plays low 20s in minutes.
Same. Follow-up from James Hood. Tyus Jones went to the same high school as him, so he plays him anytime he gets the chance. Ja being banged up, he said, open the door for it. So that's really cool too. Yeah. if you're going to get it, like that's a fun way to get it too.
I could do it if Michael Beasley could stay in the league.
I would give anything for that to happen. Although a lot of people claim Beasley for the same high school because I believe he went to like 27 high schools.
He went to like a million different high schools. He went to mine my freshman year, and that was it.
Yeah. And I just got a note that Cunningham's ownership is going to come up in the next run. So good eye on that one. I saw Beasley play in high school, but it wasn't for your high school. Unless you're about to tell me that somehow you transferred to Oak Hill for a brief moment.
I played basketball at Oak Hill.
Yeah, of course. Were you the ball? You were not allowed to play for that team. That was Beasley, Ty Lawson, Nolan Smith. I'm probably missing a couple other guys that were there. Also on the floor for that one, Gerald Henderson, Wayne Ellington. That was one of the coolest games I've ever seen. All right, let's talk about the rest of Detroit. Nobody's ever like super exciting to get to for this team. Jeremy Grant is the guy that's generally going to have the ball. I don't know how much Cade is going to affect him, but I do think that he looks okay here. I don't love the Sadiq Bey ownership, but in mid sixes, he's going to play the big minutes one way or the other. The guy that I probably have the most interest in, and I'm not excited for it, is maybe Josh Jackson, 4,400 on FanDuel, 4,700 on DraftKings, dual eligibility guard forward. As a value on a 5-gamer, that's the most interesting piece for me for a guy that's not getting owned.
Yeah, I think the rest of basically the non-Cunningham Pistons and Grant, like, what you're getting. Sadiq Bey, to some extent, what you're getting. But the rest of those guys, a lot is going to depend on those final ownership projections, because I'm with you. Josh Jackson at 4,700, if he's low owned, has a path to success, but he also moved back to the bench last game. You had Amadou Diallo start in place of him. I don't know if that ends up being a thing, but Jackson played 25 minutes off the bench. The minutes are just less consistent typically if you're coming off the bench, especially on a team like this where they have a lot of interchangeable pieces. They're not really trying to win games, so it's more difficult to determine their motivations going in and to feel like, oh, if it's competitive, we know Josh Jackson's going to close, because who knows. But yeah, as long as he's low owned, there is still upside there. I would say the same thing about Kelly Olynyk. He's back to coming off the bench now that Jeremy Grant's back, but played 28 minutes against Orlando 2 games ago. Closed that one out.
Ownership is updated, by the way.
Okay, thanks. Last game only played 21 minutes. It's a situation where, like, I'm not going to go super heavy on him, but if you get the game where Olynyk happens to play 26 minutes off the bench, he's likely to be a very good play. So it's just paying a lot of attention, I think, to ownership on this team and teams like it in general, where there's always volatility in production for players, but when you get a team like this where there's volatility in minutes as well, it just makes the range of outcomes wider on pretty much everyone, and it means that you should, in theory, be more aware of and reacting more to the ownership.
Yeah, we've got Cade at 23% now, which is a
lot more reasonable.
Yep, I agree. By the way, Hamidou Diallo did not play in Cade's debut. Cade became the 10th guy in that rotation. Then Diallo came back in when Cade did not play. So right now I'm not projecting Hamidou Diallo to play for this one.
Yeah, I think that's where I'll be at as well. Even in his start, he played 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And he hasn't been for most of the year. He's kind of just been like the last guy in the rotation.
Yeah. I don't have anything else for this one. Do you?
No, just a team where, in general, I want to pay attention to the ownership, because there's a lot of guys you can kind of throw darts at in larger field tournaments. There's not much that I'm going to be confident in as far as their chances of success.
I am 40 minutes away from eating some leftover pulled pork, and boy, am I starting to get excited, but not as excited as I am to tell you guys about the schedule for the rest of the day. Coming up immediately after this, 11 a.m. NFL Strategy First Look Show. We've got the NHL Strategy Show at 2. We've got the PGA Strategy Show at 4. NBA Deeper Dive coming up at 5 o'clock. NBA Live Before Lock coming up at 6. So you get 2 straight hours of content. Plus, we've got NBA player rankings that are free, PGA rankings that are free, and NHL projections that are free. Use those NHL projections to try to take I lost my joke. Try to beat Adam with them. That's what you should do. That's where I was going with that. I didn't get there. Ugh. I'm the worst. Miami at Dallas. Miami -1.5 in Dallas. Dallas is going to be really tricky to talk about. Miami's going to be a little bit easier, but still not all that easy. Max Strus out for the Heat, probably going to be out for about 2 weeks. Bam Adebayo is questionable. I'm anticipating Bam to play, so I find Miami to be a little bit easier to look at. On the Dallas side, Maxi Kleber out, Kristaps Porzingis questionable. I think he's closer to doubtful, and that's going to have a very big trickle-down effect for the Mavs. We're going to start on the Miami side where Kyle Lowry is aggressive chalk on FanDuel, as he should be, because he's 5,900 still. Bam Adebayo is pulling about 30% ownership across FanDuel and DraftKings. I think the DraftKings one looks pretty normal. FanDuel feels a little high. And then Jimmy Butler somewhere in the 20s and very little else from Miami. So to me, it's the big three and not much else.
Yeah, as long as Adebayo plays.
Right.
He's going to look really, really good at 7,500. That's just really a mispricing here. He's been good for years, but he's been especially good this year. Usage rate has gone up. He's just producing at an even higher rate than we normally expect. Trying to pull his numbers for this year up now, had the wrong setting in. But so if he plays, I'm going to assume that he's healthy unless we hear he's on a minutes restriction. But he's averaged 1.33 DraftKings points per minute so far this year. Usage rate is up to 27.9%, 21.7% rebounding percentage. He's one of the league leaders in rebound chances per game as well. So he's going to look really good. If he's out, then you're going back to Dedmon as a $3,800 value. You can mix in some $3,400 Markieff Morris as a value option, especially in the case that Dedmon were to get in foul trouble. But it also bumps up Jimmy Butler, who's averaged 1.5 DraftKings points per minute without Bam on the floor since last year. So if Bam is in, Butler's fine. He's still a high upside player at 9,100, but he's not a priority. If Bam is out, Butler becomes a priority for me at 9,100. I think he'd look great. You get increased usage opportunities for Lowry and Hero in that case as well. Whereas, if Bam is in, Lowry looks fine, but not like a priority for me. Hero becomes, kind of just a tournament play at 6,900. It's pretty tough to get there. But if you take Bam out, I think everyone starts to look better.
Oh, for sure there. Yeah, going to Dedmon for sure. I think Markieff Morris looks even more interesting on a day like today since Max Strus isn't healthy. Just firms up those Markieff Morris minutes. What do you think about 17% owned Jimmy Butler on FanDuel where he's 10K?
Depends on Bam. He looks good if Bam is out.
Well, yeah, assuming Bam is in. Because we have Bam in the ownership. So that ownership is reflective upon assuming Bam plays.
Yeah, so if Bam's in, then I'm not like it's just kind of a neutral play to me. Like he's still
Luka is 10-4. Same ownership.
Then I would rather play Luka.
Yeah, okay. That Jimmy Butler ownership is crazy to me at 10K.
Yeah, my point's just like Butler at 10K, I think is still fine. He's 1.34 DraftKings points per minute. He's going to play like 35 minutes if the game's competitive. FanDuel points per minute. And he's going to play like 35 minutes if the game's competitive. But it's just kind of a neutral play. And then when you start relating him to guys like Luka, yeah, they're going to look better.
Yeah, to me, Butler's the guy that I'm getting away from as a pay-up option on FanDuel if he's 17% owned. We've got Giannis all the way up. Then it's Luka at 10-4. He's the same price as AD, close to similar ownership. We don't have LeBron in the ownership projections right now, but he's $200 cheaper than Jimmy Butler. That's just a tough sell for me if Bam is in. If he's out, it's a very different discussion. But I mean, I'm not going to love it either way. But 10K on FanDuel, that's a big price tag for Jimmy Butler. Meanwhile, Kyle Lowry is like Jimmy Butler should give up like $900 of his FanDuel salary so that Kyle Lowry is priced appropriately. Like that, I feel like they're just sharing that money incorrectly. I don't know. Are you getting to? All right. If Bam is in, do you have any interest in anyone else, any sort of volume outside of that big three?
No.
Okay. Yeah, it's the same for me. I didn't get anybody more than like 5% for the Heroes and Duncan Robinsons of the world. Here's where it gets kind of crazy. We got to talk Dallas. Like I said, no Maxi Kleber, and Porzingis is questionable. I don't think that Kristaps Porzingis is playing in this game. I believe he's closer to doubtful. I think Dwight Powell's going to have to play a lot of minutes, or they've got to give 48 minutes to Dwight Powell, Willie Cauley-Stein, and or Boban. They don't really have any fours on this team. So I've got Dwight Powell in for 26 minutes. He played like 33 the last time out or something along those lines. But yeah, 33 on the dot, actually. I mean, I think 30 is very realistic once we get official word on Porzingis. I think 32 is in play. But even at 26, I like him a lot given his price tags. Let's start with this piece. How do you see the front court for Dallas shaking out?
So we can kind of use the second half last game as a blueprint there. Maxey only played 7 minutes to open that game and then never came back. So you got a starting lineup in the second half of Luka, Hardaway, Bullock, Finney-Smith, Powell. I'd expect that to be the starting lineup again, assuming Porzingis is also out. But you got like 16 minutes in the second half from Dwight Powell. Makes me think that 30 to 32 minute projection makes a lot of sense on him. Cauley Stein played most of the backup minutes. He played about 6 minutes in the second half. So you could just give him, all the backup minutes. Maybe Boban gets a stint in each half. That would be like the biggest threat to Powell's minutes. Maybe he goes from 32, 33 to like 27, 28 if they decide to throw Boban out there for 8 or 9 minutes. But either way, I think you're getting close to 30 minutes at least from Powell as long as Porzingis is out.
Okay. Well, we're on the same page there. Do you think it matters at all whether Bam plays?
No.
Okay. I didn't think
Probably
so either.
not.
Okay.
I mean, well,
I can't imagine it really does.
The way it could matter, I don't think it affects Powell. I think it affects Cauley Stein and the wings. Like if the backup center for Miami is Markieff Morris, you can just not play Cauley Stein if you wanted to. But I guess still, like, who are they going to?
They can't really. What they're really missing is that Maxey piece, the guy that can be the 5 that isn't really the 5.
I mean, like DFS can guard Markieff Morris.
Yeah, sure, but then who's playing? Then they don't really have like a 4. Like they're missing this chasm of dudes that are big enough to play those positions.
Yeah, but who's Miami's 4 in that case? Jimmy Butler,
Tucker.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's really an issue.
I'm with you there. I think we're on the same page for this one. Luka is Luka. I don't have much to add here. 10-4 on FanDuel, 11-1 on DraftKings. Based on his ownership, I like him a lot. It's a terrible matchup.
Yeah, it's not a great matchup. I would rather get to Giannis at 11-6 without a doubt.
Agreed. What do we do with the rest of this team, though? Because things start to open up. Jalen Brunson's 4,600 on FanDuel. We have him at 13% ownership. That's a guy that I'd like to have a lot more than 13% of. Dorian Finney-Smith is at like 19% ownership. I don't like that at all, really. He's a guy that I want to get to when he's not owned, not when he's actually owned. Although I understand why people are going there. The minute ceiling is just so massive. Powell clearly on DraftKings, fantastic. Anybody else you're looking at here?
So I'm with you on Brunson. I think that even at 5,500 on DraftKings, especially assuming Porzingis is out, it's extremely likely that Brunson's in the closing lineup. You're probably getting around 30 minutes from him. So he's going to look pretty good. Taking some shots on a $3,700 Bullock is okay. Keep your expectations in check, but he's cheap and the minutes should be there. Finney-Smith at 4,800, kind of the same thing as Bullock. Not a great fantasy producer, but he should play a lot of minutes. But I think it's really, Luka obviously looks great. Powell looks like a really good value. Brunson would be my third guy. And then, if you want to mix in a little bit of Hardaway, Finney-Smith, Bullock, that's fine, but it's nothing I'm prioritizing.
Okay. Really curious to see how this ends up looking by the time we get closer to lock. I was really surprised to see, like when I started looking at it, realizing that how important Maxi Kleber is for them to run like different looks. He really takes away their ability to like have legitimate fun, small lineups because they just don't have anything in that 4 range. I don't know. That's where I'm at. Moving on to Sacramento, Utah.
Yeah.
All righty. Kings and Jazz. We close out. So we've got a 7:00 start for Milwaukee, a 7:30 start for Miami. Those games should be relatively competitive since everybody's hurt for Milwaukee, and Miami and Dallas are comparable. We wait 90 minutes then to kick off a 9-point total or a 9-point game, an 11-point line, and a 10.5. So we've got a hell of a mess going from 9 to 10:30. Sacramento starts it off, 9-point dogs in Utah. They've been running a 9-man rotation. It's honestly closer to like 8.5. Terrence Davis isn't really seeing a ton of time. They're just playing these guys a shit ton of minutes. The only real question mark for Sacramento is who they're going to take out of their center grab bag as their backup. I'm going with Len today. I'm basing that on nothing other than just a guess. Your mileage may vary differently. When it comes to these guys, though, De'Aaron Fox is my number one play of the day on FanDuel. 7,700, projected for 29% ownership right now, but he's $900 cheaper than he is on DK. And I just don't think that he's a 0.91 fantasy point per minute guy, particularly given his usage rate for this season. So he's the guy I want the most. Rashawn Holmes looks like a decent value. much more so on DraftKings than he does on FanDuel. What else do you want to do for the Kings?
Yeah, so I'm with you. Fox on FanDuel looks great. On DraftKings, he's okay at 8,600. Still has plenty of upside in tournaments. He has struggled a bit, only 0.96 DraftKings points per minute this year, but I'm not overly concerned about that when he has a 43.4% true shooting percentage. His three-point shooting has been down. Still has a 29.4% usage rate, 26.2% assist percentage, and he's playing a ton of minutes. So I think, a very, very good play on FanDuel, a good tournament option from a ceiling standpoint on DraftKings. Holmes on DraftKings at 6,300. It's a difficult matchup with Utah's front court and Gobert, but Holmes is averaging 1.3 DraftKings points per minute this year. He's rebounding at a really, really high level. And I think 6,300 is just still too cheap of a price tag for him. So he stands out. Outside of that, Barnes playing really well, 7,400, not a priority, but certainly playable. Same can be said for Halliburton, Hield. Davion Mitchell at 3,800. I think is a reasonable tournament value. He's not someone that you can really trust because the minutes aren't always going to be there and the production can be a bit spotty as well. So far this season, he's only averaging 0.63 DraftKings points per minute. But we know that essentially the closing lineup for Sacramento is going to be De'Aaron Fox, Rashawn Holmes, Harrison Barnes, and then two of Halliburton, Hield, Mitchell, depending how the game's going, depending how guys are playing. So, for example, I prefer Cade Cunningham at 3,600, but you should have a pretty large ownership difference between the two. If you happen to have a lineup that's pretty chalky, you need a value piece. Davion Mitchell is going to beat Cunningham a decent percentage of the time to where you could use him as that contrarian piece. So I think that's where Mitchell ends up being useful.
Oh, I'm so happy you were able to keep talking there. No, that water went down the wrong pipe, man. I thought I was going to drown sitting at my desk. Oh, man, that was not fun. I'm really surprised to see Rashawn Holmes be 23% on FanDuel. I'm anxious to see if that falls at all. DeAndre Ayton's status might matter there, but just above them, I'm finding Christian Wood a little bit more interesting. I like going all the way up to AD. And I think there's a little bit more value at center than it seems. So that's going to be an ownership number that I pay attention to. But Fox is the guy that I want the most, particularly on FanDuel. That price is just wrong. Nothing else for Sacramento. Let's go to Utah. Actually got a lot more of Utah than I was fully expecting for today. I don't know if it's just because it's a 5-game slate or what, but Mitchell, Gobert, and Conley are all in the 20s in ownership on FanDuel. They're all close to that on DraftKings. Mitchell is $8K on FanDuel. I love that price. 8,800 on DraftKings. Not really that big of an issue either. For the first time in a while, I really like the starting five of the Jazz today.
Yeah, they look good here against Sacramento. The pricing is very reasonable. Mitchell at 8,800 is, I don't think like a slam dunk or anything, but there's definitely some value or some upside to be had at that price point still. 1.2 DraftKings points per minute, 33% usage rate, 24% assist percentage this year. So he looks pretty good. Gobert at 8,100 should have plenty of success here against the Kings front court. He's produced at a high level this year with 1.38 DraftKings points per minute, 28.5% rebounding percentage. I assume that comes down at some point, but he is rebounding at a ridiculous rate so far this season. And the usage rate's at 20%, which, while that's not high, when you're talking about someone as efficient as Rudy Gobert, that's a pretty big deal as well. If he stays up around 20% as opposed to 16.5 or 17% like we've seen in the past. Worst case at 8,100, Gobert would be a good play, even based on his previous rates. But if he's going to continue doing what he's done this year and keep getting these sorts of opportunities, he's going to look even better. 6K for Conley looks fine. Should get around 29 minutes or so. His production's down a bit this year. Assist percentage is down to only 20%. 20.6% usage rate is down a little bit from last year as well. So I think that, you could just see the assist percentage stay down a little bit, a little bit more of that going to Mitchell, maybe, Ingles taking a little bit of that as well. But I think it's also pretty likely that Conley bounces back closer to last year's numbers, which would make him look like a good value here.
Clarkson and Ingles, not really guys that I'm looking at, but I like the way that you describe Conley, and he's only 5,500 on FanDuel, so even a little bit more appealing over there.
5-game slate, 5,100 on DraftKings is fine too.
Oh yeah. I got him in 16% of my sim, so I'm right with the field there. He's 5,400 on FanDuel. I'm a little less interested for Boyan. I'd be more likely to just go to cross my fingers and hope it's a Royce O'Neal falls into some stocks game. But Mitchell's my guy for today. 8K on FanDuel. I like that price.
There's people in chat like that are just realizing that to win a tournament, you have to have guys have fluky games. It's kind of fun to watch. What'd you say?
Yeah, to win the tournament, the whole lineup's a fluke.
Right.
Like just because, yeah, it's weird. We talk about it a lot, but like a winning lineup is a bad lineup in terms of
It's
against its expectation.
Right. I mean, a winning lineup makes your projection for that lineup look like shit.
Yeah, absolutely. Either way. Anything else for Sacramento, Utah?
No.
All right. This one's going to be fun. Go ahead.
Since we have the time, I was just going to expand quickly on what I was kind of laughing at there. Like, because people are hating on the Tyus Jones play that, won a bunch of money. It's not about, it's why we talk so much about roster construction and upside and like paths to success. It's not about like, you're not trying to win tournaments by like putting together the highest projected lineup necessarily. You want that's why you want to factor in ownership. You want to factor in the volatility of players and how much, upside they have, because you're not the tournament that wins a lineup isn't you didn't project it to do what it did. Like it had a bunch of guys do much, much better than they were quote unquote supposed to. So it's putting yourself in a position to have that happen. Nobody was looking at Tyus Jones saying, he's going to have a great game tonight if Morant's in. And you don't even have to look at it and say like, oh, I think it was a good play. But it also, I'm sure, I don't know what the lineup looked like, but it also opened stuff up, for stars to get in there to where it's just like, okay, if for one reason or another, Tyus Jones plays a few more minutes, like it's unlikely to happen, but he's going to have a good game. It's just, it's why we talk so much about roster construction and range of outcomes and ownership. If you're just waiting to take down a tournament because the players that that projected the best did the best, you're going to be waiting a really long time.
So here is the lineup for you if you're curious. Tyus Jones in at point guard. LaMelo Ball smashed. Paul George smashed. Shea 46 fantasy points. Gary Trent smashed. OG Anunoby smashed. Sabonis went for 50. George Niang, another salary savings, did exactly what he needed to do in that role. And then Drummond, obviously. Lineup hung 440 on FanDuel. One going away by 12.8 fantasy points. Massive. Dude, Tyus Jones could have had a pedestrian day. And this lineup is still a decent shot to win the contest because everything else hit.
Yeah. Tyus Jones is a 16-minute guy, though. Yeah, on average, Tyus Jones plays, like 12 to 16 minutes. I don't know exactly what he's averaging, but he's
averaging whatever minutes Ja Morant doesn't play.
Right. He's one Ja Morant injury, rest, blowout, whatever, away from being more than a 14 to 16 minute guy. That's kind of the point. That's why like we talk about in tournaments backup centers and at times backup point guards, because they're usually the ones that are most likely that are only one guy away from getting more minutes. One guy being in foul trouble, one guy getting, rolling his ankle and missing 3 minutes of the game. It's backup point guards and backup centers. They're one guy, they can just step up and play an extra 3 or 4 minutes, and they're priced to play their 14 to 16. So, again, you're not looking and saying, this is the game Tyus Jones comes out of nowhere and has a big game, but you're putting yourself in a position where when weird things happen in a game, you have a very high upside lineup to take advantage of it.
Yeah, because everybody else in every other spot is like high-end talent. LaMelo, Paul George, Shea, OG, Sabonis, like Drummond for yesterday. Like you're loading up on good stuff all around it. Tyus worked out perfectly. George Niang worked out perfectly. And now there's $100,000 in their FanDuel account. Sponsor for today. We're going to dig into No House Advantage. This one's going to be a little bit different. This is we're talking about player props in this situation. They've got over 500 player props offered. It's 100% peer-to-peer. All new users get a $25 deposit bonus with the promo code Awesemo. There's mass entry capability. There's bigger prize pools. You can use our No House Advantage projections and optimal lineup tool to help you take down these contests. You can download the app in the App Store or go directly to nohouseadvantage.com. I'm going to hit you with 2 props, Adam. I'm curious whether you would go over or under.
Okay.
The first one up, De'Aaron Fox, over under 24.5 points.
FanDuel score?
Real points.
Oh. I guess if I listened to the number, that would have made more sense.
Yeah.
24.5 real points for De'Aaron Fox.
Yes.
I will take the under.
All righty. I have De'Aaron Fox at a crisp. Where's he hanging? I got him at 22.7. So I will also take the under. Doesn't make him not a good play, though. Donovan Mitchell, over under 26.5.
Over.
I got him at 26.4. So I'm not going to touch that one. Use the tools on the website. They'll help you out a ton. Thank you to No House Advantage. We move it on to the New Orleans Pelicans, who will soon enough be the Seattle Supersonics, taking on the Phoenix Suns. 11-point dogs, 216 total. Brandon Ingram, questionable. Devontae Graham, questionable. Garrett Temple, questionable. Still no Zion. On the Suns side, no campaign. DeAndre Ayton is questionable. I don't really know how we talk about the Pelicans right now. I've got everybody in. If that's the case, I think Joe Val's the only real interesting piece here. If Brandon Ingram ends up out, all hell breaks loose for the Pelicans.
Yeah, and you have, Graham questionable too, so that would potentially open minutes as well. But regardless of who's on the floor, Joe Val is going to look good again. He's playing ridiculous minutes this season. He's continuing to produce at a high level, just like we've seen him do in the past. So even with the price tag coming up, he still just is going to look like a really good option. The rest is just really dependent on the news. If Ingram is in and Graham is in, 8,200 for Ingram looks fine. 6,400 for Graham looks fine. I wouldn't say that they're priorities. Joe Val would still be ahead of them for me, but I would be getting to them. If they're out, Nickeil Alexander-Walker should take on a bigger scoring role and probably get more minutes. He'd look better at 6,700. Last game without Ingram, you got Herbert Jones starting. He played 36 minutes. He's not a high usage guy. He's not really an offensive player, but if you're going to get 36 minutes from a guy at 3,500, he's going to at least be worth considering. Trey Murphy could step into a bigger role, especially if both guys are out. Hart probably plays a few more minutes here. He got up to 30 last game, and there's more usage, for him to take advantage of, more rebounds as well if Ingram is out. So, it's really tough to talk about this team at this point with all the questionable guys. But I think it's safe to say that no matter what happens, Joe Val looks really, really good. If Ingram and Graham are in, they're going to look like solid plays. If they're out, I would expect Alexander Walker to see the biggest bump in usage.
Yeah, Kira Lewis, 3,100 on DraftKings is about to look really interesting. If Devontae Graham gets the axe, that's going to be just a load up.
Don't sleep on Satoransky too. Back in the rotation, played 16 minutes last game.
Yeah, that was interesting to me. Is he in for Garrett Temple?
I think so.
Yeah.
But the reason that I mention him is he can play multiple positions. And if you get a situation where Ingram is out and Graham is out, I just always like looking at guys like Satoransky where it doesn't really matter who the Pelicans decide they want to play more minutes. It's just going to be easy for them to be like, okay, Satoransky, you're running point. Okay, Satoransky, you're defending the three. Like it's just going to be easy for him to be on the floor, kind of no matter what they decide to do lineup wise or rotation wise.
Keep your eyes peeled for this one, guys. We're going to need more news. It's a really difficult thing to break down, but if people get lopped off of this Pelicans team, it's going to create a lot of value. On the Phoenix side, we've got Chris Paul and Jay Crowder, both 30% owned on FanDuel. I do not agree with those numbers. On DraftKings, Chris Paul is 30% owned at 7,600. I don't really want 30% Chris Paul. Cam Johnson, Jay Crowder, DeAndre Ayton, and Mikal Bridges are all about 14% owned. Devin Booker's pulling a little bit of ownership. I'd actually like to get to Booker at 10% at 8K on DK if I'm getting to anything from Phoenix. But how do you work your way through this Phoenix team that's, I don't know, sort of like the Phoenix version of Utah? They look the same every day.
Yeah, it's more so just, I think, spreading out exposure to these guys. Devin Booker clearly gives you a nice ceiling at 8K. Paul at 7,600, not playing, probably playing 31, 32 minutes, but a very productive player when he's out there. DeAndre Ayton at 6,800 I assume Phoenix is going to want him to play a lot of minutes here against Joe Val. So I think he looks like, a good option, but there's not much that stands out to distinguish themselves from each other. I'll also mention JaVale McGee in the, kind of same vein as someone like Tyus Jones. Yeah. Typically JaVale McGee is going to play 14, 15 minutes. He's not going to really help you, but if anything goes wrong with DeAndre Ayton, JaVale McGee is going to play more minutes. And pay you off really, really nicely. So it's just, another paying attention to competent backups that are one foul trouble, injury, whatever, away from getting several more minutes at a cheap price tag. McGee certainly fits that bill.
Again, keep your eyes peeled there. DeAndre Ayton questionable. There's no reason that JaVale McGee can't play 24 minutes or something like that tonight if this breaks incorrectly. And 24 minutes of JaVale at 3,400 on DraftKings is going to be a guy that you're going to want to have. Tricky team, though. Great spot for Phoenix. I mean, they should just roll the Pelicans and this line could be 14, 15 or something by the time we get to lock if this breaks the right way for the Pels and we don't get Devontae Graham and Brandon Ingram in the lineup. Who's your favorite Phoenix Sun here?
Ayton.
Okay. That scares me, but 6,800 is just... I feel like DraftKings is just $1,000 cheaper on every single center that's just a center right now. Like, I feel like this high fives, mid sixes range is just loaded, even on a 5-gamer, just every day.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's a big gap. It's, Ayton this year, 1.13 DraftKings points per minute, Booker 1.17, Paul 1.21, but playing fewer minutes than those two. I expect to just kind of be playing, similar exposures to those guys based on whatever each individual lineup needs.
You see your boy Smith didn't get his 3rd-year contract picked up by the Suns?
Who? Jalen Smith?
Yeah.
Why is he my boy?
Isn't he the Maryland guy?
Oh, yeah. And no, I didn't see that.
Yeah. So he's it's like there's only been like 6 or 7 lottery picks ever that have not had that pick or had that contract picked up. So he joins that illustrious list. Great idea, Suns. Definitely shouldn't have taken Tyrese Halliburton in that spot. Whoops. That one's going to go down as a giant mistake. That was a giant mistake at the time, too.
Somebody brought up McGee's asthma. That hasn't been a thing in like 3 years or 4 years.
No, it has not. Anything else for Pels Suns?
No.
Josh thinks Raptors suck and one of the worst teams. Meanwhile, they just won 4 in a row. Whew, we're looking at 4-game samples now, baby. Look at this. Buckle up. 4 games. They won 4 games in a row. I don't think any teams have ever won 4 games in a row in the history of the league.
Did you want to walk back your Scotty Barnes take now since he's shooting differently? Or did you want to wait for him to keep making you look bad?
Well, I didn't think that he was going to do that because he's been a bad shooter forever up until this moment. But no, I'm not surprised that the Raptors are making another guy that's a bad shooter into a better shooter. They've already done it with Siakam. They already did it with OG. I talked about it on our draft show when I called Scotty Barnes to the Raptors at 4, by the way, that I liked the pick. And I thought that was the type of thing that the Raptors could fix. But yeah, I'm a little nervous to see where Scotty Barnes ends up going from here. Toronto 17th in offense, 8th in defense right now. It's kind of wild. I didn't think their offense was 17th. I really didn't. I'm surprised that it is.
High or low?
High. But I mean, just because of how bad, like Van Vliet, below average true shooting. OG Anunoby, well below average true shooting. Gary Trent, like super well below average true shooting. Scotty Barnes is the only one above average. Khem Birch is neutral. Precious Achiuwa has been terrible. I don't know how this offense is what it is. I really don't. Who have they beat? All right, so 4-game win streak is Knicks, Pacers, Magic, Pacers. Okay, congrats on the 4-game win streak. Losses to Chicago, Dallas, Boston, or Chicago, Dallas, and Washington, your boys, and then a win against Boston. I don't expect anything happens good for the Raptors this year. Let's close this one out. Houston Rockets in LA, 10.5-point dogs, 218 total. And on the Houston side, not a lot we got to deal with here. No Daniel House. Q tags, though, on Jayshawn Tate and Daniel Tice. I don't get the sense we're going to get that information early on. It does matter a lot. I don't really know what to do with it. Christian Wood and Kevin Porter Jr. are both pulling a lot of ownership. I think that they should be. Both sites. I'm all over both of those guys. I don't know what else to do with Houston, though.
Yeah, I mean, the rotation they run when they're healthy is appealing. 5,800 for Green, 8,300 for Wood, 6,200 for Porter. These guys in competitive games are getting 36 plus minutes. It's just, obviously they're 10-point dogs at the Lakers. The minutes could disappear in the fourth quarter, but I think in tournaments, Jalen Green, Porter, Wood in particular are reasonable. I'm not looking to any of them in cash.
Not looking to any of them in cash. Interesting.
Probably not.
Okay. I don't know. I might be a little heavy on Porter. The usage is tough to get away from. What do we do? Okay, so what do we do if Daniel Tice is out? Is it Şengün season?
I mean, more minutes for Nwaba and Tate,
who is also questionable. Do you think we see any bit of this Houston news before lock?
Probably not.
Yeah. If there's no Tice, can Şengün play 24 plus here?
I guess he could. I mean, he played 20 last game, so conditioning shouldn't be a problem or anything.
Right.
And he played a nice chunk of those alongside Christian Wood.
If Tate is out. So if Tate is out, I think we're just giving a bump to Kenyon Martin, David Nwaba.
Right.
Tice, I guess, in a weird way on the opposite end of this. How are you going to approach these guys heading into lock? I'm guessing you're just not going to have Houston outside of Wood and Porter.
Yeah, I mean, if we don't get any news, I'm probably just going to project everyone to play. I think that, we're waiting on a ton of New Orleans news as well. So I think that I'll probably have just a good amount of New Orleans and Houston guys just mixed in tournaments, because while I don't love Houston as far as priorities go, I do think Wood, Green, Porter, potentially Şengün are good enough plays where I'm still going to get to them in tournaments, even if they're not my highest owned guys. So I think I'll still just be able to late swap once we get Pelicans and Rockets news.
Okay. Anything else you want to touch on from Houston?
No.
On the Lakers side, we've got no Trevor Ariza, no Kendrick Nunn, no Talen Horton Tucker. We're used to that. LeBron is questionable. Wayne Ellington is questionable in that I don't think that he's available to play. They just keep letting him dress because they need a 12th guy. Dwight Howard, also questionable. The Dwight Howard piece is interesting. If Dwight is out, then AD is going to be starting at the 5 again, so that they could have DeAndre Jordan be the backup center. That matters in terms of structure for the team. Don't know if it matters all that much to me right now. What do you want to do with Russ, AD, and LeBron? I've got a favorite here. I want to know who yours is.
My favorite, if they're all active, is pretty much always LeBron, just because I'm less concerned about him disappearing in any particular game than I am Russ. And then I think, LeBron just produces at a little bit higher rate in fantasy than Davis does. But really, I think it's kind of, if they're all active, I just view them as tournament options where I don't really love any of them. I think that they're all priced right now to a point where, LeBron missed enough games where Westbrook's salary came up, Davis's salary came up. They are overpriced for all three players to be active. So that's not to say that, James, Westbrook, Davis can't have a good game and that you shouldn't have some in tournaments. But as far as prioritizing them or looking to them in cash, I think it's hard to get to any of them at their current salaries, assuming all three are in.
I don't mind AD, 10K on FanDuel, 9,700 on DraftKings. He is the guy that I'm most interested in of these three. I'm hoping Howard is out. I'd like to see AD be more at the 5. I think that's more beneficial to him just in general. Any thoughts on the rest of this? Because we've got Kent Bazemore at 29% ownership on FanDuel. That's not a number of ownership that I want to try to follow up because he is quite bad so far. Avery Bradley pulling no ownership as intended because he's at 0.48 FanDuel points per minute so far this season. Do you get to Malik Monk chalk-ish? 15% owned on DK. I don't see it.
That seems weird to me. I mean, 3,400 is cheap, but yeah, I don't really get it. I mean, if Howard's out, that could open up more minutes for Monk. as they run smaller lineups with Davis at the 5.
Yeah.
But, even last game where Howard was out, Monk played 18 minutes.
Okay.
He's averaging 0.64 DraftKings points per minute this year, 14% usage rate. I mean, I get that he's cheap, but I don't really understand why I'd roster him at high ownership.
No, I'm with you there.
Like, he's the kind of guy where if he were getting no ownership, I would love to throw some darts at that and just hope that you get, a good shooting game from Monk, because then he will take more shots. He's not afraid to shoot. But if the ownership's already there, I just don't really want to play any of these peripheral guys, assuming that all three of LeBron, Westbrook, and Davis are in, because there's just not shot attempts to go around.
Let's sum it up then. Who are your favorite plays for today on DraftKings?
Giannis, Bam if he's in. I really like Joval. I like George Hill for value. Cunningham for value, even assuming he's going to play, 22 or 23 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, if you want my favorite plays for today, guys, go watch the contenders videos for FanDuel and DraftKings, top 10s across both sites. Anything else you want to touch on, Adam? It looks like we stuck the landing today, finally.
Now I'll have the deep dive article out in a couple of hours. Be back for the deeper dive at 5 with, I think, Lofty.
I think it is Lofty, but I'm not entirely sure. Anyway, good luck today, everybody. Enjoy yourselves. Win some money. Come back and tell us, because sometimes we get to wake up and do this show and talk about how one of our subs won 100 grand. It could happen for you if you wanted to. So good luck, everybody. Win. We'll talk to you tomorrow.